new initiative by Springpod where we bring inspirational career stories to you, delivered by influential people. These include athletes, entrepreneurs, influencers, and many more. They're here to tell you all about their career journeys and share a few important life lessons and give you tips on how to take better control of your future. So far, as I said earlier, we've had some absolutely amazing speakers, including Anne Daniels, the international polar explorer, Mark Warburton, football manager, and many, many more. Now, don't worry if you missed any of those, because like I said, you can catch all of the replays on demand anytime via the Learn Lounge website. I'm Imi, and I'll be hosting this session of Learn Lounge. Just a couple of points to make before we properly start. The talk should last about 40 minutes, so please hang in through that. Feel free at any point to ask Monique, our guest, questions through the Q&A tab, because we'll be having a Q&A section at the end. Remember to spread the word about Learn Lounge by tagging us on social media using the hashtag LearnLounge. And finally, we will be raising money for the Children's Trust. So please do donate if you can. Right, this morning we are fortunate enough to be joined by an absolutely incredible entrepreneur, Monique Choudhuri. Monique is a fantastic businesswoman who has extensive experience driving businesses through people development. Alongside this, she also boasts an impressive portfolio of board positions, most recently joining the board of directors for Women in Football. It is an absolute pleasure having her here with us today. Monique, hello and welcome to Learn Lounge.
Thank you very much indeed, Imi. So everybody, it's very, very good to meet you in what is a very unprecedented time that we're living in at the moment. But I think today we can be really put and look at some of the great things that are available to you going forward. I thought that what I'd like to do to start off is to talk to you a little bit about my story and where I've come from and how I've got to where I've got to now. And I never guessed, if I looked back many years ago, that I would be in the position I'm in now, and how our paths seem to intersect and cross and overlap at different places. So if I were to plan my career many years ago, I would not have planned where I'm sitting today. But sitting where I am today, I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do, and I feel really fortunate. And I want to share some of the things that I learned along the way, and I hope they'll help you in forging a career that gives you the satisfaction and passion that I feel in terms of what I do. So I'm just going to take you on a potted journey. So what you see are the 4 roles that I actually fulfill in my world. So I'm a non-exec director of Brentford Football Club. I am in charge of their leadership and development. I do some senior leadership coaching for the directors in the club and some of the senior managers. And I'm also their community diversity inclusion champion. So what does that mean to you? Well, I forge partnerships with some of our sort of key, what we call protected characteristic partners. A lot of you would have probably heard of Kick It Out, who are foremost in tackling racism and discrimination across the UK in football. We work with Level Playing Field, who work with disability. We work with Stonewall, who work with the LGBTQ community. And I work with our very diverse community, which is the London Borough of Hounslow, to try to get more people attracted to coming to the club. Some of you may or may not know that we're in the process of building a new stadium. And that stadium was just about to go live at the beginning of the new season. And obviously that's been put on hold because of what's been happening. But we were hoping to go into our new stadium at the start of the season, but also being in the Premier League. I'll talk about that more in a moment. So that's one of my roles as a non-exec director there at Brentford Football Club, and I interchange with a bit of consultancy work there. Formerly and presently, I have been running a consultancy for 27 years called Career Path Training Consultancy. And what that does is that does leadership development, coaching, consultancy and management consultancy for a variety of companies you've heard of and you've not heard of, some of them being places like BA, Sky, Ramada Hotels, NatWest, to mention a few that you know of, a number of gaming companies that you wouldn't have heard of. So I work with small and large. Women of Football, which is my newest pursuit. I've been a board director with them for about a year now. And I work with them to develop their leadership offerings for people entering the world of football on and off the pitch. I help them develop those courses, but I'm also an advocate for them. So I speak in situations like we're in now. but I would also go out to events and speak. I've spoken at the BBC, in Manchester. I've talked to, football cohorts across the country at MK Dons, at Manchester City. And I love it. I love the work I do with women in football. There's a lot we're doing to work with championing women that don't have a voice in so many ways. I'm also a school board governor. And so I work with a school in Potters Bar called Dame Alice, which I'm very proud to associate with. They're a great school and they have a completely diverse community of people, and they work with people of all backgrounds and all abilities to get the very, very best out of them. So how did I start this? I started this because actually my first role when I left school, I was actually a trainee manager for John Lewis. And I went on a graduate management training program. And I said, I don't know if I like management and retail, but I quite like buying and going into what I thought was the very sexy world of buying. And actually, it was something I aspired to. And by the age of 22, I had achieved what I wanted, which was to be a buyer. And I worked for a company who you may know called Miss Selfridge. And then I moved to a Scottish company, and the Scottish company I worked with for many, many years until they sold out to a company which is now defunct. And when they sold out, I decided to leave the fashion business and do something completely different. And I went and joined a company where I trained to be a management consultant. And so my leadership development career started from there. How did I get into football, though?
Sorry to interrupt. If you don't mind, could you please explain to us a little bit about, for those of us who don't know, what a management consultant actually is?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. That's a really good question. So what a management consultant is, a management consultant goes into organisations and they advise organisations on how they structure everything from finance, how they look at risk, how they look at compliance, audit, how they work with their people. So often people will use a management consultant when they want to either grow their business, go into some level of growth, which they can't do personally. So they use outside advisors, specific external advisors to actually help them grow. Or they may have an area of business which they have an issue with, and so they want outside people to come into the business and intervene with them into how to do it better. So it may be how to look at how we use our people better, how to develop our people, or maybe how to get the best out of the people that we're not getting out of. So big companies that are well known for management consultancy, we call them the big four. There'd be people like, Accenture, there'd be people like Deloitte, people like PwC, BDO Stoy, even Grant Thornton, lots of companies who have graduate programs looking how to develop you in all areas of management consultancy. It's a fantastic career route if you can get onto it. And it's also a great route where if you don't go into university, some of them still take you as an apprentice to learn. So if university is not the thing that you want to do, some of these big players in consultancy will still look at you and put you either through university or learning or apprenticeships in order to actually enter you into the world of management consultancy. So I was lucky. I did it through work experience and not through that route. But if I would have looked back, it would have been somewhere I probably wanted to start my life. So once I had gone into management consultancy, that was then when I decided to set up my own business. So I set up my own business, which is Career Path, doing all the training, which was the area I really learnt well on my role as a management consultant. And I have that business still today. So that's what makes me my money. My board stuff is much more what I would give as a freebie. A lot of board positions are paid, but a lot of board positions aren't paid. And if you're starting your board work, and a lot of people do start their board work quite early these days, even in their early 20s. Often we take our first roles as non-paid because it gets us into understanding about governance and how to work with a business. And for those of you that doesn't know what a board is like a critical friend to a business. And what that board does is it challenges assumptions, it helps a business make decisions, but it doesn't run the business. It advises on the business, but doesn't run it for it. So we just make sure that a strategy works through the business. We don't stop them from doing it, but we intervene if we think that doesn't support the business well to get its goals. And there are many young boards developing now from members of the community, from students, from people coming into the world of work who've got a fresher view on things and are not what we call pale, male and stale boards, where it's only older people advising on what we do. So a board career is great if you're running a portfolio career, i.e. if you have 1 or 2 jobs and you want to look at being on a board to help people with their governance. So that gives you a potted career of how I sort of entered management consultancy. How did I enter football though? I entered football because I did some work for Brentford, and I did some work for Smart Odds, which is a company which is owned by the Brentford owner. So the Brentford owner owns Smart Odds, which is an analytics organisation. So they do statistical modelling and research modelling and provide statistics for Brentford Football Club and other organisations. I worked for them. I was introduced to Brentford. I helped Brentford for a number of years in areas of leadership development and organisation, and then they invited me to be on the board. And through that role of being on the board at Brentford, then I was invited onto Women of Football. So my football career started unintentionally, but now I'm in it. I absolutely love it and wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So I would like to ask you a question before we go on to the next bit of my presentation and my talk, which is how aware are you of the diverse careers that are available in football? So how aware are you of the diverse careers that are available in football?
So all of you guys watching, pop into the Q&A tab and type your answers in there, and we'll be going through them in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Emmy, did you want to ask another question?
Just while waiting, you mentioned earlier a lot of the stuff that you do is centered around diversity. So obviously you've worked with a lot of different minority groups across a lot of different industries.
Yes.
Is there any particular reason that you got so interested in working and, well, to an extent, championing minority groups and diversity?
I think that as a woman, I've often felt that I was marginalised, that I didn't have the opportunities that other people had. I was lucky in my first part of my life that I was in the fashion business. And so in the fashion business, I'm amongst a lot of women. So I didn't notice the difference really about what was going on in the outside world. Once I came out of the fashion industry and went into what I call the big bad corporate world, I realised that maybe I was having to work twice as hard to get half as noticed. And so for me, part of my thinking has been to always challenge the establishment in that and to give people a voice that perhaps otherwise wouldn't have it. So once I understood from a gender point of view what it felt like, then I could understand that from a cultural background, what that's like. I come from a minority. You might not see that in terms of the way I look, but I am a different religion. And I also am married to somebody who comes from India. And so for me, we understand what it's like to have had discrimination. And so when you've had discrimination, you always want to actually help others learn to tolerate some of the experiences and get better at managing some of the experiences they have when they're faced with some of those things in life too. So one of my key passions with diversity inclusion is bringing people together so that they feel that they belong. So I'm really look at the inclusion element, the diversity inclusion, not marginalise people so they feel separate, but bringing them together so everyone feels equal. And that's how I developed my passion for diversity inclusion, and still love that now. I'm also working on think tanks with diversity inclusion with universities as well, to try and look at how can we socially mobilise people so that we understand when somebody walks to a bus stop, you know what the experience they might have versus somebody else in their community that doesn't come from the same culture as them.
Yeah. So
we look at diversity inclusion through a number of perspectives, and not just, what would you do if you're Black? What do you do if you're Asian? What do you do if you're a Somali group? We're looking at, what are the experiences of these people and how can we see things through their eyes? So provides experiences for them that feel like they're belonging to everything.
Oh, so it is mostly through, personal experience.
Yes. And I think that I think being a woman has made me really look at diversity and inclusion a lot. Being in a mixed marriage has made me look at diversity and inclusion, look in my own sort of background and my immigrant grandparents. I've also really seen things through a very different lens, and that's really affected, you know, the way I look at women in work, look at ethnic minorities in work, and look at inclusion in work. And so it really is front and center of a lot of what I do.
Okay, so, well, I'm taking a look at the answers. A lot of people are saying that they don't have a lot of awareness. A lot of people are saying that they have hardly any, and you know, the highest we've got is somewhat aware, which, you know, at least there's a little bit of awareness there, but it's still not, you know, super high.
Okay, so I can give you a really good background here. So when I work at the football club, you know, I go into the office, and I go into the office for a really good reason. And I go in because I'm there on the spot and I can see what's going on. But the departments that are present that are not to do with the football pitch itself and the players and the coaches are multiple. So, for instance, you could have a career in finance in football, which is everything from working with player transfers to actually, you know, paying the people that work in the football, to looking at financial fair play, transfer fees, etc. You know, you look at the anatomy of what it takes to run a football club. There are marketing, social media, comms. How do you put out comms on a regular basis so people stay engaged with football? How do you market to the community so that the fans stay engaged and you get people to engage with the club? There's fan engagement in the community, diversity, inclusion. We can even talk about training and HR and learning and development, which is an area that I get involved with, you know, heavily. There's events management. So things that we do maybe, you know, through the year, things that we do to work with older people in the community. Maybe we'd be considering holding an iftar, for instance, we know 1 year, you know, to celebrate, you know, Eid. We would be looking at, you know, an event to bring out Asian, you know, members in. So we would be involved in event management, community and family experience. So what is it like to be a family coming into a football ground? So people are out there benchmarking, doing statistics and looking at, you know, how do we get families involved so they feel safe to come into a football club? And one of the other things which a lot of students are now really interested in and first jobbers is what we call analytics, which is the notion of being able to use stats, player stats, to either bring in new people, new footballers into the organisation, or to look at the form of footballers, to use predictive modelling to see how to get people into the world of football. And what we talk about at Brentford is we are a, you know, smaller club. We're punching very well above our weight at the moment in the championship. We're in the playoff places at the moment, and we talk about we don't outspend the competition, but we certainly outthink them. And we outthink them by looking at analytics and analysis. So analysis is a fantastic route. So if you like figures and you like football or you like sport, it's a fantastic career. And you can marry that by working directly in a football club, or you can do it by working in an analytics organisation. But these are just some of the major careers that are available that actually what we call off-field football business. So all the things that are involved in running a football business, but aren't necessarily to do directly with the players themselves. So that just gives you a sense and a taste of the flavour of some of the things that are available to you.
So, you know, just based on what you're saying, is it that the world of football is a lot more analytical and a lot more kind of thought-based than it is just about athleticism?
Yes, I think it is. I think athleticism does play a part, but I think it is thought-based. It's to do with how do you find talent. A lot of analytics is about how you find talent. And I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a film with Brad Pitt and Josh Hill many years ago called Moneyball. And it was about how they took a baseball club that wasn't doing very well and got them really high up the league into the playoffs. And that was how they did that, by analysing the stats of player form before they brought them into the club. And it's a really fascinating piece, because if you work high into the community, you go deeply into the community, you can find people from other countries that are playing excellent football, and you look at their form and they wouldn't be noticed otherwise by scouts, but by form alone, you can attract them to coming into the club. And looking at how often somebody throws a ball in, somebody kicks deep, somebody slides, sometimes they get in a goal and they shoot on target. the analytics behind that is absolutely extraordinary. And you can form formations, playing combinations, you know, based on that. I know one of your people that you had on as a speaker, Mark Warburton, would have spoken about that, having been a trader previously, so lots of stats-based stuff, and then being a football manager. There's quite a lot of overlap in looking at your data and using that to predict the line of play. So, you know, stats is a fabulous career to get into. And obviously at the moment, you know, lots of things are on hold. But if you were looking at that, there are organisations and operations that help you understand that. And it's absolutely brilliant if you have a love of both, you know, data, figures and sport, and you can marry that passion together. So that's just another career route that you can have. So I'd like to move on to women in football, if I can, and, you know, talk about women in football. And I just wanted to ask you a question right now, and there's a poll coming up on the screen about how engaged do you feel with women's football? So would you say strongly a lot of the time when there are major women's football tournaments, or through occasional news reporting and apps, or not at all? So I'm going to give you a moment now to do that poll and then submit it.
Well, obviously the polls are climbing there. While people are filling it in, you know, you work a lot with women in football. Do you feel like there is a big connection between the amount of women working on the board with how engaged women are with the sport itself?
I think women are very engaged with the sport itself. I think women are engaged with football generally, actually, not just women's football. And I think one of the things that we try to look at in terms of women in football is just not about women's football. It's about women on and off the pitch. So our role is about providing this network which supports people, which challenges discrimination, which champions peers, develops them, celebrates their success and achievement. But what it does is it increases women's representation at every level of the game, on and off the pitch. So whether you're in a men's club, whether you're in grassroots, or whether you're in a women's football team, we are making progress with women's football, but probably not making as much progress as we would like. So, you know, for instance, women's football season got, you know, tanked and curtailed a lot quicker than the men's did, which is a real shame, because in a year where we're getting ready to go to the Euros 2021, it was really important for us to have lots of high profile. And there are some challenges with the having, you know, women's football being seen by everybody as being equal. But if you've ever watched a women's football game, you'll know how athletic it is, you know, how thinking it is, how strategic it is, and how important it is for families to engage with football altogether. And, you know, we see that, you know, women's football, as long as it can get sponsors, being as important, you know, as men's football. Just to give you a little stat, there is a club in Mexico called Club Tijuana, and they have 50,000 people every Monday night going to watch women's football. And in order to make that happen, they dedicated one night of the week to women's football. And so that now it's become, you know, a countrywide phenomenon. Everyone goes to watch football on a Monday night, women's football, and they have 50,000 people regularly once a week going to watch women's football. You know, at the moment, unless we give it free, you know, you probably get audiences of 1,000 to 2,000 at the best, or when it's televised. So we've still got work to do.
We're just looking at the results of the poll here, and
Yes.
The majority of people have said C, which is when there are major football tournaments on.
Yes. And that's what we find, the engagement. And that's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for responding to that. We're absolutely finding that the biggest engagement is when there are football tournaments on. But because there's what we call cracks along the way, i.e., you know, football, women's football is not televised or shown to be sponsors in between major tournaments, people lose their engagement for it. So they're very behind it and very supportive of it when there's the She Believes Cup, or there's the World Cup, etc., or even when there's Euro 2021. Hopefully it will still come next year. But it's in between. And the only way that we can make that happen is if we increase sponsorship, we increase branding, and we televise more women's sport, not just football, but more women's sport much more regularly, you know, on TV. So one of the things that we've done that you might be interested in, and again, you know, this is all about careers in football. It's just all about careers generally, which is we did a groundbreaking campaign with Twitter, and we developed what are called a hashtag What If campaign. And we asked corporates, ambassadors, you know, members of the public to take action and improve the landscape for every woman in football. And we gave this a new lease of life. So Twitter combined with this, which was absolutely wonderful. And we got loads of companies and corporates pledging to give people coaching, to give people training, to put them through university, to put them in football related careers. And some of the people that got involved with this were these. So we had people like Barclays, the FA, Everton, the Telegraph, Judy Murray, TalkSport, you know, the Michael Carrick Foundation, Mishcon Duray, a well-known lawyer, to actually help us and give advice to people. So just to sort of up the, how can I say, the profile of women in football and women's football so that it becomes something that people take seriously. So as you can see, we're talking about, you know, being your best self. There's so many ways that you can be your best self. You can do it through so many, you know, means, so many different types of, you know, career. And I've seemed to have landed in football, but it's because I had other careers first that sort of took me on this journey. So whether you call it a happy accident or a coincidence, I don't know. But I definitely believe that trajectory, you can't always plan, but you can have a good set of goals which actually help you there. So the next thing I'd like to do is to actually take you through some career tips to actually help you, you know, look at this. So when we talk about creating a value personal brand, we say, be yourself because everyone else is taken. If you're not yourself, then, you know, who's going to look at you? Who's going to take you seriously? And I talk about this word being authentic, and authentic is so powerful. And when I talk about authentic, you know, I mean being a version of yourself that people take seriously. When they look at you, they say, she is the real deal. He is the real deal. I'm not getting some fake version thereof of an individual. I'm getting somebody that, you know, really is passionate about what they do. But I'm myself. So you don't get to see a mock side of me. You get to see the real side of me. And when you start off in a career, I think it's really good to develop your personal brand. And I think this is one thing I did quite early. To champion myself, I made sure that I had, you know, good goals. I looked at how I thought other people see me. And so one of the big aspects of personal brand is, how do you see yourself, but how do others see you? And what is that? What is your personal brand? So you may want to think that about yourself after this presentation today. How do you see yourself, but how do you think others see you? And the gap in the middle is the thing that you need to work on when developing your career. So often what we do is we have these things that, you know, help us along the way. And if you look at this diagram that I put up on the slide, we have, you know, our behaviors. These are the things that we do on the daily basis. These are the skills, the competencies, the things that we're good at. We've got our personal attributes. We've got the name, the people, how do we see ourselves? We've got social media, what we put out there, what's our footprint out there, you know, in the world. We've got what we call our Google self. And if you Google yourself, it's really interesting what it finds on you.
Interesting and terrifying.
Interesting and terrifying indeed. And so far, when I've Googled myself, I haven't been unhappy with what I've seen, but I just keep doing it just in case there's a rogue comment that goes on there. And that's not for arrogance. That's just to make sure I'm not putting out the wrong impression out there. But underneath all of that, what we've got is, so you've got all that stuff on the surface that people see that you want to put out there. But what you've also got underneath there, and this is the thing that people don't often talk about when they're embarking on career, is what they value. What do you value yourself? What's important to you? Are you interested in equity, fairness, integrity, honesty, transparency? You know, what is it you value? Because often we want to work for people that reflect our values. And often when we do a job with a company where our values and their values don't meet, we feel like we're in some sort of conflict. So when we're creating this trajectory, looking at the career we want, it's very good to think about what values we have, because if we know what we've got, we can try to target organisations that meet those values. And then once we've got that, we can talk about what our strengths and weaknesses are to make sure that we up the strengths to meet with those values to go out to those organisations, or we dilute some of those weaknesses so that we can be our better self. So before we get to the next slide, I'd like to show you a poll. And which skill do you think is most important when first embarking on your career journey? Would it be passion for your sector? Would it be having clear goals? Would it be the ability to network? Would it be knowing your personal brand? Or would it be understanding how to develop yourself, your areas of personal development? So I'll just give you a moment to do that.
Just while they're doing that, obviously you've done a lot of people development in all of the businesses that you've worked in. What would you say is the best way to approach developing teams and individuals, and why do you enjoy doing it so much?
I think there's many ways to approach team individuals, and that's an excellent question. I think developing teams, it's all about working to get the best out of each other, but together. So when you're a team, you often have a shared goal. You often have a clear purpose. You often understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. You know what each other's priorities are, and you're able to work with those to actually get the best job done and to get your outputs there. There's a word that is often bandied about, and you'll see it loads if you're on LinkedIn, called collaboration. And it's the ability to collaborate with people. Well, true collaboration is about sharing and listening. It's about the ability to communicate clearly about what you want, to be able to hear what other people's points of view are, but to give an opportunity for all people to put in their points of view. And if you want to get the best out of the team, you understand all of those things, plus individuals' drivers and motivations. So what drives an individual? What motivates an individual? And how can you best serve those things through working in a team? Now, there are some people who aren't necessarily team players. They're quite independent. But even then, within a team, they'll have strengths that they can bring to the table. So it might be they're very good independent decision makers. So when faced with a crisis, they're very, very good at being able to make a decision. And actually, you need somebody with that skill set in a team.
Yeah.
So managing and leading teams is really important. But being part of the team, being a good team member is great. So knowing, even if you're passionate and you're driven and you want to forge ahead, and maybe the people around you don't, it's good to know how to come back to being part of a team, because you're able to then leverage each other's strengths and weaknesses to be better together. And it's like old saying, some of the parts is better than the individuals.
Yeah. Just looking at the poll results, we have got 27% of people who have said knowing your personal brand, and tied in first place, we have 27% of people saying passion for your sector.
Very good. Excellent. I'm pleased to hear that from everybody. So it's interesting, because I think passion for your sector gets you going in your first or second job, knowing exactly where you want to go. So, for instance, we've talked about careers in football. We've talked about behind the scenes. We've talked about management consultancy, training and development. But I could easily be in marketing or PR or finance as I'm talking to you about this. But if you want to go into finance, you have to have a passion for that sector, because otherwise it will feel dry being in that job. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone. Sometimes we take a job to get on the first rung of the ladder, and it may not be our dream job, but it feels right for right now. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with building your portfolio and building your skills and building your brand and getting on that ladder. And sometimes we all do jobs that we don't want to do, one to make money, one to get ourselves recognised, and one to get ourselves known. But never lose sight of that passion. Also, other passions emerge. So I think it's brilliant to know what your passion is, what you believe, your skills, your experience, your background, talent. I do think personal brand is important. We live in a world of social media. We're Instagram heavy, we're LinkedIn heavy, we're Twitter heavy. And actually, we leave what we call a footprint. So if we say anything which can be interpreted badly, we don't get a second chance to make a first impression. We're done. Our footprint is out there. And we can't eradicate that, and we can't erase that. And you may have heard of, you know, notable scenarios where people have been pulled up for things they said on Twitter 5 years ago, and it comes to haunt them now. So how do you want to be seen? How do you see yourself, but how do others want to see you? So some of the things that will help you with that in terms of your passion are understanding what your beliefs and values are, knowing what your skills, strengths and weaknesses are, but also have some really clear goals. Where do you want to go next? Even if they're small, put your goals into some bite-sized chunks. Have a long goal, say 1 year, 2 years down the line, maybe even 3. Let's say you want to go into law, for instance, or let's just say you want to be a manager of the Uniqlo because you think they're a really great company and they look like a good company to work for. Have some goals, but look at the ways that you need to get there. So long goal and short little bite-sized goals. Think about your online presence and what you say in your footprint. But one of the key skills is networking. Who do you know? Who knows you? Who do you know and who knows you? All the questions that you need to ask. Try and ask people, you know, parents, friends, friends of friends, people who've been at university, people who've been successful, thought leaders. Ask them questions about what makes them successful. What did they do to get ahead? And learn from them. And maybe, you know, look at having an informal mentor. Because if you have an informal mentor, that's somebody that can guide you through this pathway that you're taking. And then something I always talk about is defining what we call a USP. Yes, Amy, you had a question.
Interrupt. Just very quickly, because you brought the topic up, social media is a huge part of our society now, and a lot of young people who are starting off careers are very active on it. As a businesswoman, what do you generally tend to think about social media?
I think that social media is very good. I think I think Twitter is great for sound bites. I think that I do a lot of retweeting with comments, and that's what I do. I don't tend to put on standalone comments too much, but will do them if I'm really passionate about something and really believe it. I think it's great for sound bites. I don't think it's good for putting overly personal views on, because if you put too strong personal views and people don't agree with you, you know it can help you and it can both hinder you. But I'm not against it at all if that's how you actually demonstrate yourself authentically. So I think LinkedIn is really excellent. I think if you use LinkedIn well and you blog and you're a thought leader, I think that LinkedIn is a really, really good thing to do. I mean, I think Instagram is fun. And I think, you know, all of the other mediums, you know, are fun, and putting up videos and all those things are great and fun, and they're great for expression. And I would say do that, because that is a brilliant form of demonstrating that part of yourself. But I think to have a LinkedIn profile is really important. To be a thought leader is really important. To set up online communities, go on online communities is really good. I mean, Facebook does have some business forums on there, so I wouldn't say that it is unusable now for younger people. But I still think that LinkedIn is better for that, because you will find thought leadership from every person who is anything, you know, in the world of business on there at some point, putting something up there that's important. So when you can, get yourself a profile on LinkedIn, run it by a couple of people who are successful, and ask them if you're putting down all of the right information, because this feeds into my point 5, which is your USP, your unique selling proposition, your elevator pitch. It's what defines you and what makes you interesting. So when you go into an interview, if someone says to you, well, what defines you? What makes you interesting? What is it you're going to say about yourself? Is it your values? Is it your beliefs? Is it the things you feel about the world? Is it how you engage with life and you engage with the greater community? Is it just because you're passionate about your sector, so you know everything about it and all the leaders and thought leaders in that particular area? So social media is so important to me. Social media is so important for putting your thoughts down, but be careful what you put down there, because you've got to make sure your footprint is how can I say, acceptable to other people, but it's also interesting to other people. And the one thing I would say in terms of developing your personal brand, which is seek feedback and views on yourself. Always ask people what they think about your strengths and weaknesses and how you come across, and incorporate that feedback and go back out there again. because you never grow unless you see yourself as other people see you. So every time you get a new piece of learning, put that into yourself and let that define your elevated pitch and your passions, and then go back out there again. So, if you want to have a look at this, through the eyes of something you can take away, look at your role specific skills for something you're interested in. What qualifications and experiences do you have? Even if you've done a first aid course with St John's Ambulance, even if you did a public speaking course at school, even if you went out and you helped community, or you did Duke of Edinburgh, what did you learn from these things? To what extent do you think you meet the requirements of your future role? So have a think about how you're building your brand with, what have I got? What am I good at? Am I a good communicator? Do I help well? Am I good at doing things? When you give me a task to do I do that? And how good am I at doing that? And what transferable skills do you have? Do you do spreadsheets for everything when you go on holiday? Are you good at putting up the TV or doing that technical thing when no one else in the house can do it? Are you the one who diffuses an argument in your household? If you've got skills to, deal with, family tension that you might have, and God knows there's enough of that probably right now while we're all in lockdown. So it's a skill you've probably developed. So are there any gaps in what you might need to do to get ready for the role that you identify? Now, we weren't going to do an exercise called a flower exercise, and I haven't changed that that slide. But it was all about, what do you want for yourself and where you're going to go. So for my final slide is for your brand and your, career journey is, have a look at who you are. Think about what you personally master. What are you good at? What do you do for the sheer hell of it that you love? Is it strumming chords on a guitar? Is it singing in your room to musicals? Is it, being the next Dua Lipa? Is it, analysing, how someone's going to play on a Saturday? Is it being good with, with numbers? Think about how you can influence people in your community and in your career and in your universities or tech colleges or in your schools. How are you influencing and how are you coming across so that people see you as you see yourself? Just try things out. If you need to, give some things for free. Give it away. Give that time away. Be altruistic and give that time away. But whenever you do it, do it with enthusiasm, passion and willingness. And that will pay off, and people will then come to you as being the go-to person because you were always ahead of the game, because you were always giving stuff and doing. Now, obviously, when you get into business, you can't give everything for free because you've got to monetize yourself and live. But when you're starting up, it's really good to know, how to give of yourself. So for me, that really, completes, my presentation for you today on your career journey. And I hope everything I've said will help you take a look at yourself in a way where you can start developing yourself differently. Any questions from anybody at this particular point?
Yeah, I was going to say that was a fantastic session. I think we've all learned so much about, building your personal brand and, representing yourself. I'll just go through to look at some of your questions because they've been flooding in as we've been doing the talk. The first one is, do you think that being a woman puts you at a disadvantage in certain situations and ultimately denied you certain opportunities? And if so, how did you overcome that barrier?
Oh, whoever wrote that question, I adore you. That's a very good question. And actually, that goes through my mind so much. Yes, it did. Definitely being a woman disadvantaged me in certain situations. However, it gave me clear advantage in others. I think that I always had clear goals. I always knew that I had skills to make an impact. I'm numerate. I think I'm a good communicator. I hope I'm a good communicator there. I always presented well, and I would always be the person that put my hand up and said, yes, I'll go for it. And I think how I got over that disadvantage was initially I would try and work twice as hard to get noticed. But afterwards, what happened was I let my skills speak for themselves. And what I did was I aligned with people higher up than me in organisations that would sponsor me. So, for instance, the person that has been a fantastic support for me in Brentford has been the chairman, because the chairman saw my work in another sector and said to me, I think you'd be good in this. And so if you align yourself with people that understand the impact of your work, it doesn't become such a challenge or a hard slog in order to get yourself to the next level. But you've got to have clear line of sight, and you might get knocked over. And it would be like saying for a show jumper, oh my God, they've put a load of hurdles in the way, a load of jumps in the way. How am I going to get over those? So you're going to have hurdles, but each time you pick off a goal, you'll know that you've succeeded, and it will give you another skill that you didn't previously have. But it will also, more than anything, build up your resilience. But align yourself with people where it's okay to showcase your skills and use them to sponsor you in organisations and social situations.
Fantastic. We have somebody else here who's asked, how do you think that the marketing and promotion of women's football will change and progress in the future?
Wow, that's a crystal ball question. And I think that has been impacted by COVID, actually. I think we need some brave sponsors to really say, okay, let's make women's football a regular appearance on TV. We need the big brands, the Nikes, the Adidas. We need all of those people, household brands to come together and go, women's football is equal. It's good. It's not played the same way, but it's equal in the enjoyment and the entertainment value it gives. And until we are able to have sponsors and televised live women's sport equal in our field of vision with men's, we won't be able to promote it and market it in the same way. I think there's a lot of marketing comms going on behind the scenes. And I think BBC has really upped its game with that. I mean, Sky's upped its game with that. TalkSport does brilliant work in that. And by having women presenting in all fields of women's sport, but men also presenting in women's sport, but having women presenting across all sport ups the profile of women, and it definitely helps women in football. So I think sponsors and televising are two keys to making this better.
Somebody else asked, as a female leader, what has been the most significant barrier in your career?
Wow. I think I think I'm ambitious. I think I'm ambitious, not to a fault. I think I'm ambitious, and therefore I've always wanted to go further. But I think the biggest barrier for me is, I suppose, wanting to get to a higher position and feeling equal as a woman in order to do that, feeling that I am good enough because I have got good skills, that it doesn't matter whether I'm a woman or a man, I've got the skills to do the job. And I think my biggest barrier has been getting that across to people, that don't see me as a woman, see me as somebody that's got really good skills. And then if you see me as somebody that's got really good skills, you won't be looking at me whether I'm a woman or a man. It will be blind. It will be, I've just got those skills, and that's what you need in your organisation. And that's one of the things about women on boards, which is really important. If you have on a board everybody that looks the same and sounds the same and is the same age, you're going to get the same thinking all the time. And what you need is to have people with different thinking, diversity of thinking, so that people come up with different answers. So I think my biggest barrier has been showcasing my skills to be seen as equal. And I think once I have acquired those skills and I can show that I've got those skills equal to anybody, I overcome that barrier. I hope that's answered that question.
Yes, we've also had somebody here who's asked how they can improve their footprint as a young adult, how they can better represent themselves specifically online.
So I think if you are to use Twitter a lot, I think one of the things to do is to talk about causes. If you talk about what you believe in, passion things you believe in. So, for instance, it could be aligning with certain charities. So, as a young human, a young adult trying to get ahead, what are your passions? Is your passion for inclusion? Is your passion for depleted societies, deficient groups, charities that are not getting as much funding? So I think causes, I think world causes are really important. So, environmental stuff. I think a lot of young people today are fantastic around environment. And I think, people who are older could learn lessons from how youth engages with environment. So passions and causes, without ramming it down people's throats on things like Twitter, I think are really important. I think on LinkedIn, get yourself a good profile, talk about it, get part of groups, look up thought leaders. There's opportunities for you you can have content pushed to you about your particular passions in commerce and in corporate world. So I would do those two things. I would when I'm on social media, I'm also, I think it's really good to show the fun side of yourself, but be careful what you put out there. I think, drunk stuff is great when it's private, but if there is no question now that organizations, when they're looking to hire, will look through your social media trail. So if you want to get ahead, make sure you are mindful of those things about what you put out there. But I hope that gives you a feel for some of the things that you could do on social media.
We've also had somebody say, I never thought about the analytics in football as a job. What is the best way to get into this career path?
Okay, so there are a couple of routes to do that. Is you can do that by approaching football clubs directly. So I should imagine that every Premier League club, every Championship club, and probably some of the League One clubs, and some of the most innovative of the League Two clubs, so all of the EFL and the Premier League, will have somebody working for them, either internally in an analytics, or they'll be attached to an agency that will be doing that for them. It's to approach them and say to them, this is a passion, this is an interest of mine. I'd like to find out more about it. Can I come in and can I apprentice? Can I come in and see what it's like? Can I get some work experience in this particular area? You can also go online and look at some of the statistic modelling organisations that maybe, look at some of the gaming and the betting and that sort of thing. They have loads of analytics people working for them. So, anything from, anything around gaming online, new games, I mean, good games, things like that, that actually they will always have analysts working either in their marketing team, or their channels team. So they're good companies to work with. And funnily enough, retail has analysts, working with them as well. So that could be a really good route. And there are thought leaders like the IG group, Gartner, who will also have, analytics posts, whether you can apply, and talk about it. And the big consultancies will also have opportunities for that. So if you go into Google, into the search bar, and you put in analysis and analytics, jobs in analytics and analysts, you'll see what type of companies are looking and what type of jobs they're looking for. And it can start to, how can I say, tease you and tempt you a little bit about what you can do. So football isn't the only place. Most mainstream organisations are now using data and stats, in order to predict market trends, and they need that. Look at the world we're living in now, like COVID. If we're not using data and analysis, how are we going to predict what's going to happen with our world? So it's going to be a new norm for us to use analysis and data and analytics as a job. So it's even being done in health, as well, and pharmaceutical, etc. But if you are interested in football, that would be the routes. So it would be companies that do work with football, stats companies that do work with football, or football clubs themselves who would take you on.
Right, we're going to wrap this up with one final question. Guest 110 has said, what advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders and entrepreneurs?
Oh gosh, have you got an afternoon? We'll need a whole afternoon for that one, and maybe we need to speak separately. I think the first thing to do is to female leaders is to be yourself, because everybody else has taken. I think that first quote that I put up there is to be yourself. And how do you be yourself? Well, that's a very good question. I think it's to develop your personal brand and to understand what your strengths are and understand what your values are. And I think is to actually network with people. There are many women's networking organizations.
I apologise. It looks like we're having a few technical issues here. So just bear with us one moment while they get resolved. Right. Well, unfortunately, due to tech issues, we are going to move on because it seems that we've lost Monique, unfortunately. I think that was an incredibly informative session. I know that I learned a lot and I'll be applying that to myself. It's been an absolute pleasure having Monique here with us today. Just very quickly before we go, just quick reminder, we are raising money for the Children's Trust. So if you can, please donate to them via the link on your screen, which is the childrenstrust.org.uk/donate. Now, next week, we have some absolutely fantastic speakers coming up, and we are kicking off next week with Samantha Hope when she's going to give us an insider's guide to a career in law. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one. I know I certainly won't be. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.